I'm going to get started. Thanks for coming. Today's topic, the next big thing, and why should I care? For my talk today, I thought it would be kind of fun and educational to talk about some of the next big things, the buzzwords that and topics that are always sort of percolating in the background of our daily lives as web designers or web users, editors, developers. It seems like there's always something that we need to be paying attention to, or maybe we should be paying attention to, and it's hard to tell if it's something we need to know now or in the future, or we can just ignore. So as I started putting together this list of buzzwords, I saw it as an opportunity for me to catch up on some of the things I had been curious about and share them with you, and that's what we're going to do. So real quick about myself, I am Dan Moriarty. I'm on Twitter, Minneapolis Dan. I work with a company called Electric Citizen here in the Twin Cities. We are primarily a Drupal shop, doing creative strategy, development, and support. And I've also been involved in helping organize this local conference since 2011. So the next big thing, I don't know about you, but at times I felt overwhelmed or inadequate or confused when I hear all these things being talked about. For example, when I go to DrupalCon every year, and there'll be some BOF or some session talking about some topic, and I'll barely heard of it, and people are just conversing about it, giving presentations about it. And so you start to worry like you're missing some big trend that you need to catch up on. And I don't know if that's a feeling any of you have experienced when you see that before. And how do you react or deal with that? So I'm just going to try and dig in and cover. I just picked 8 topics that were of interest to me that hopefully you will also find of interest. It's not a long list. It's not everything, and maybe after the talk, if you guys have any suggestions like, oh, well, you should have covered this topic, it's something I could consider for future versions of the talk. One of the things I was curious about when I was putting together this talk too is I wanted to look at it from a personal angle in how I tend to be skeptical about new things and what that was about. I just wanted to kind of come to terms with my own way of viewing this, and when I hear a new technique or a new technology, I'm curious and eager to learn it, but I also sometimes view these skeptically. Is this really going to be better? Is this going to really be necessary? It's something we need to do, right? So for example, voice assisted technology, voice search, Alexa and Siri and stuff. So I don't have a smart speaker yet. I'm guessing that a number of you do. I have an iPhone and I have Siri turned off. I turned it off because I was annoyed at how poor it seemed to translate the request I was making. And for a while there, I had a home button that would stick. And while the phone was in my pocket, Siri would think I'm telling her to call someone, and I'd be calling someone I have never called before in my life. So, but I get the potential, and I think it's cool because, for an example, years ago, I don't know if it was 10 years ago, I purchased this thing, which I never know how to say, the Nabistag Rabbit. Does anyone remember these guys? So I kind of view this as like an early entry to the smart speaker category. So these were cool little cute devices. They connected to the internet, and you could ask them to do things like you could ask them for the weather, you could ask them to tell you a joke, you could ask it to tell you a story, and then it seemed like it had all this potential to grow this new category. But then after a few years, the project was just shut down. The servers no longer supported it. And I think the point is that sometimes a game-changing new technology comes along, and it's something you need to know now. And sometimes it's just still years away before impacting anything you do. And so if that's the case and you're busy and you're focused on what you're doing, is that something you can safely ignore? And maybe a few years down the road, it's suddenly relevant and everywhere, and then that's when you need to catch up. I think this happens on a smaller scale all the time in things like theming, for example. If any of you are themers, Flexbox and SVGs and other developments, they've been around for years before people started using them because they just weren't practical for widespread browser use. And so you kind of make that determination, like CSS grids are the new thing, but we're not using them yet because of what I believe is not full browser support. So, do you need to learn it now or do you wait? That's the kind of questions I ask. And it does sound like maybe being lazy or not curious, but I don't think it is. I think sometimes you just have to ignore things and put on blinders and stay on the right path because sometimes that next big thing is years away. So we only have so much mental capacity and so much time to keep on top. And lastly, before I get into my specific topics, I just wanted to clarify for myself and maybe others that as a skeptic, my definition is you question things to understand them versus a cynic who's dismissing things as not worth understanding. So I view skepticism as kind of a healthy approach to looking at new technology. So who's heard of this or looked at this, the Gartner hype cycle? This is an attempt, this was last year's, but it's an attempt to predict, these buzzwords, these new things that we have coming, and whether it's something that's, happening now or it's still making its way from the experimental stage to mass consumption. So from this chart, you can see one of the topics I was going to talk about was VR. It's already passed into what they call the slope of enlightenment. So they're viewing that as a technology that's coming very soon, whereas another one that I'm going to touch on, blockchain, is still just the glow of the newness of it all seems to be, according to them anyway, is fading, and soon people will enter the trough of disillusionment where you realize maybe it's not really that great or it's not ready for mass consumption yet. All right, so I'm going to start with voice search, which I think is a fairly easy to understand topic. So who here has a smart speaker? About half the room. So it's not just me that doesn't have one yet. I probably will get one this year, but I've been holding off. So other people who have them, have you used them to search for things online? Can you, like an example?
How many inches is it to the moon?
Okay, so you ask it a question and...
How many tablespoons are in a cup?
So a lot of measurement type questions?
Use it for timer, like set a timer for 9 seconds.
Okay.
What time is the NBA finals? That kind of.
Yeah, okay. And did it work well when you asked the questions? Did you generally get the results you wanted?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to assume most of you know what voice search is, but as far as why should you care? Well, for starters, all smartphones have voice commands like Siri, so they already are capable of that. Research has shown 20 to 25% of searches on mobile devices are by voice, so it's clearly a growing category. Also, more and more consumers are purchasing these smart speakers, so they're one of the top-selling items on Amazon. And one research study predicted that 50% of all searches will be by voice by 2020. Of course, me being me, I'm skeptical of that, but regardless, it definitely I don't doubt that there's a trend heading in that direction. So knowing that, what should you be doing? And in a sense, as far as a web designer, what should you be doing? And in a sense, there's not a ton. The first thing is make sure you have content online that can be found by search engines. That's pretty basic, but some of the tips and guidelines that I've read have to do with making sure you're using plain spoken, natural language, and understand the difference in the way people search with voice search. So for typing out a request, you might type Minneapolis Indian restaurant or something and get your results, whereas with voice search, it's geared towards people speaking in natural phrases. Where's a good Indian restaurant? And then contextually, it will assume you mean in the location you're in. So the results are different. You should keep your content easy to understand. It's recommended no more than a 9th grade level to the content you're putting online to be accessible and get good results on voice search. This one's a little debated, but I've seen how if you have an FAQ list, that often can be indexed as part of that voice search, where you're writing more the question and answer style text that tends to be how people are doing voice search. If your markup is using appropriate formatting with the schema markup, and having that authoritative domain really helps, because unlike with Google, it's bad enough that you have maybe 8 to 10 results on a page that people choose from, and they rarely go to the second page of results. But with voice search, they try to only offer you one answer to your query. So being on top of the search results for what you want to be found for, I guess, it seems to be more critical than ever. So my call, voice search, I think you should learn it now. Learn what to do for your websites that you manage or you build. All right, next topic, VR and AR. So why should you care about the virtual world? As you can see from the photo, VR is this mind-blowingly awesome technology that will change everyone's life. Just amazed looking at things in 3D. And I confess to being a little torn about this right now, between I could see how this would have great potential, but a lot of the examples I'm seeing thrown out there, for example, you can walk into a virtual movie theater and see the listings of movies, and they're in 3D, and then you can pick them. And it's who cares? I see it fine on my screen, but there is potential there. So let's see what that is. So what do we mean by VR? I think there's maybe 3 categories you could look at for. One aren't all technically virtual reality, but might be grouped with that. So one is 360 video, virtual reality itself, and augmented reality. So I'm going to just touch on each of those briefly. So 360 video, anyone remember the old ways of doing this online? I think it was VRML was the technology. You would have realtors saying, come look at this house. You can take the virtual tour of the house. So this is sort of like that, but much better. No special device is needed to view 3D video. Has anyone looked at these before? So I hadn't looked at one before until I was doing this talk, and I pulled up this example of, these are my search results for the New York Times video, and I thought it was pretty cool. You're watching a normal video, but then as you tilt and pan your phone, you can kind of leave the person that's supposed to be in the frame of the picture and look over there at people on the street, and you kind of make your own choices where you want to focus during the video. There's no need to cover your field of vision like with virtual reality, and there's a fairly low bar to entry in creating these. But there's no interactivity. So with VR, traditional VR is using devices for an immersive experience like the Oculus Rift, which you might have probably heard of, the Daydream headset, Google Cardboard, and others. And I think some of the cool examples that I've heard but not personally experienced of what the potential for VR is, imagine you're a group of people and you're all streaming a concert in different locations of the country, and you all are putting on your headsets and you're feeling like you're there in the same place, or you're being able to play drums on stage with a band. Those kind of fun, immersive experiences, maybe not the most practical, but they do sound fun. With VR, you're sort of leaving the real world to interact with the virtual world, and that's different than augmented reality, which I'll touch on next. There's also a push for something called web VR, and that's experiencing the virtual reality within a web browser, as opposed to another device, and that's something that Google has been pushing. The thought is that you could have like a progressive enhancement. So I'm viewing a web page just normally, but then if I put on my big crazy goggles, then I can see more of a 3D or experience or different contextual things that can appear in the image to enhance the experience. So I think that sounds good. Right now it's only available on special versions of browsers, but Google is hoping to bring that to a regular browser like Chrome. So we'll see. If you want to view any of these, good place to start is webvr.directory. Nice showcase of some VR projects that are available online. Okay, so augmented reality. One example is like the photo you see here where you're holding up your phone's camera and over the real world it's overlaid with things like you'd hold it over a restaurant and it would give you a rating. Like that's kind of cool. I think the future that for this would be you're wearing glasses where you don't have to kind of be looking at the world through something small in your hand, and it's just this immersive experience. And sort of, I guess, what Google Glass was trying to be, but just, again, as an example, something that was really cool, not quite ready for prime time, so it went away. But, some year in the distant future, we'll be bringing those back, I think. So the difference in augmented reality is you're bringing virtual objects into the real world. You're typically viewing the real world through the lens of a smartphone camera, and there's apps like IKEA Place or Pokemon Go where you can. IKEA Place is the new version of the IKEA catalog, but it's better. It's a way to preview furniture in your home. That's a good example of augmented reality. Just this week, Apple announced a new version of their developer toolkit, ARKit version 2, which will let two users on two different iPhones see the same thing while running an app. So I think that has some interesting potential for what it's worth. And I think I have this right. Google is calling 2018 the year of AR. So that's something to celebrate. Oh yeah, that's just an example of that little GIF is an educational example. They placed a museum piece in the room they're in. They can zoom in, pan around this sculpture. It has little data points where you can click and get information about it. So some kind of neat educational purposes. So my call on that is something you could dabble in, but it seems to me like it's still several years out from impacting our daily lives as web designers. So third, artificial intelligence. What do we mean by AI today? Now we're not talking about sentient computers that think like humans, but it's sort of been co-opted as a term. We're really talking about pattern recognition, and that's on a very large scale. So things like shifting through piles of data and stacks of analytics and telling me, for example, how a marketing campaign performed or how people are using a certain device. And it's about machine learning, predictive algorithms, things like image recognition, like you see in the Facebook's using. Those are all examples of AI. One interesting example that I came across was this idea you can send an image to AI device, a program, and it can see the image or video and then write a caption as to what the content of that is about. So that has some interesting implications, I think. It's also about conversational bots, which we'll touch on next, and things like self-driving cars. Does it impact the web? Well, it does in some ways, like tools to enhance your content, like Google Translate, that's using a form of AI. Tools to help manage your users, like digital assistants, managing customer support tickets, tools to improve UX, like web personalization. Those are all examples of AI in action. Tools to increase engagement, like personal shoppers. Tools there we go. Tools to improve efficacy, like parsing data and user analytics. And then lastly, tools to replace your job, like the purported web design builder at Grid.io or this UKit AI that you give it the data and it will decide what your website needs to look like, so then you don't need a web designer. So it's a little concerning. We'll all be replaced by robots. So what should you know? Well, I think just being informed by what these tools and libraries are available that you can offer to enhance your site. You could use tools like Google's AI API, which I think is now called Dialogflow, to construct tasks that can be performed like by voice command. And there are some Drupal integrations out there that I think let you take Drupal data and interact with the AI API, but that's something to investigate on your own. So my call on this, again, is something you could dabble in, but it seems to me that it's still several years away from being part of our day-to-day lives as far as building websites. Okay, so moving on to a specific version of AI, chatbots. So this is a big buzzword, and something that probably a lot of you have interacted with before. Chatbots are a form of AI, and they're using logic trees. If you say this, these are my options. It's a guide in searching and sorting. It's a initial interface for easy to answer questions. Does anyone use chatbots on your websites now? Nobody? I mean, you've interacted with them, but as far as implementing them on one of your projects or your organization, so they take advantage of the natural language processing to understand requests. It's another form of AI. I thought this example, this Landbot.io, was really intriguing as an example of chatbot as the website's UI, as well as a service that can make a chatbot for you. Has anyone heard of this service before? It was new to me. So instead of your typical interface where you would go to a website and you would see the menu bar, you'd want to know, for example, what would be a good example? I want to know what your pricing is. And instead of looking for the right category in the menu and such, you would start with this interface, and then it would just ask you the questions as you're looking for it, and then it would serve up that content. So it sort of replaces that whole navigation experience. Yeah, so this is one example of how that works on this site. So, I don't know, I thought it was interesting from like sort of a change of dynamic the way you present information. So why chatbots? Well, users are spending more time in messaging apps these days than social media. They're wanting instant interactions to help get something done, like you want to get your flight time. You don't want to have to navigate to find where on the website there's the flights, where can I find my information. You can just ask a chatbot a question and it could potentially give you the answer. So delivering data directly to the user and not requiring you to find it online is a big advantage. And other uses are things like lead generation, asking for feedback, providing basic customer service or personalization. So how do you use them in applications? For all the Slack users out there, we probably have all used Slack bot before to do things like set reminders or ask for help, or I use it to put, GIFs in messages to people. Apparently there's a taco bot you can use to order tacos through Slack, which I had not heard of before, Taco Bell. So you can create your own through AI or services like Landbot. And there's a Drupal module I found that seems to be serving Drupal content to a custom chatbot, but that's, again, something, if you want to learn more about this, to dig into. I didn't get that far. So my call on that is to dabble, something you can do now. All right, so we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to speed through the next few. Blockchain. Anyone here own Bitcoin? Any Bitcoin? You got 1? 2? All the Pantheon folks own Bitcoin, I guess. That's cool. So why should you care about blockchain? Well, this is such a deep topic. I can't possibly hope to cover it in 1 minute, or understand it in prepping for this. But I just did a brief overview, so if you do nothing about it, when I was at DrupalCon in Nashville earlier this year, I did see some people talking about it, having a session about it, and I thought, oh, is this something I need to be learning? So I did some brief investigation, discovered at its root, if I understand it correctly, it's about sharing data and recording the same transactions across chains of computers and networks rather than just one central database. And the advantage to that is processing speed. It's more secure, less likely to be hacked, it's tamper-proof. So all these things seem great. I did come across a Medium article where this user had Drupal syncing user account data between multiple Drupal sites using blockchain. I can't purport to understand that yet, but if you're interested, it's something to investigate. So it's used in cryptocurrency, and I could see a future use for financial transactions. E-commerce might have a use for it, or large e-commerce like buying a car. But I don't think it's really applicable to web designers and developers today. There's that link to that Drupal article about blockchain that I can share the slides later. So my call, you may differ, but is something we can ignore for now. This next one, AMP, accelerated mobile pages, probably not on the same level of buzz as some of these other topics, but I was curious about it. I'd known about it for a while, but I haven't really dug too deeply into it, and so I wanted to do a cursory overview and note that someone's giving a talk tomorrow about this in more detail. So if this is something that interests you, there's probably a lot of information to be gathered, but at its base level, it's a way to publish, mobile optimized content, making your content load fast. The data is cached in a Google CDN, so it's preloaded and served up instantly, sometimes in search results. It's an open source initiative by Google. It's also something that some great fellow Drupal company, Lullabot, got involved with to make a Drupal module that you can use. And I know two Minneapolitans from Lullabot have written some good articles about AMP and what it is and how you can use it. So those are some links I'm happy to share. It can be applied to any content type. So should you be using AMP? So there's a couple camps on this topic. So it's relatively easy to implement on a website. It could be used on article-heavy content. I saw some recent article about Google promoting how they could be loading web pages built in AMP inside your Gmail browser, email browser, which if you want to do, I don't know, there's some debate whether that's really an experience that people want. It's not for dynamically changing data. It's more for static data because it needs to be cached. It's not for something you interact with, for example, as you're viewing data. But you could do performance enhancements on your site outside of using AMP. And there is some people that might argue that it could lead to a walled garden of content. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it's certainly a debate whether it's leading towards a future where more and more content is inside of Google's own domain, or Facebook has a similar product. So, So and of course another question is, do you need everything to load instantly, or can you wait a second or two? So something to think about. So I'd say it's something you could know now if you have a good use case for it. So the last, I'm running out of time here, the last two, progressive web apps. A PWA, what is it? It's an alternative to native apps rendered on the web in your browser. So using just HTML and JavaScript libraries instead of tools to build apps. It's a dynamic experience of an app, and then it offers great features like data that can be stored offline for use on a phone or tablet at a later time. It seems like a good idea to have this sort of unified experience for an organization or company instead of some of our information is here on the website and some is in the app. If you can not have that separation and that sort of, again, that walled garden of having to go through a app store to get at content, that has some advantages. There's a website at pwa.rocks that you can view some examples of progressive web apps. Just run out of time here, so I'm just going to do this quickly. Should you learn it? It does create that seamless experience, as I said, and it's not hidden behind an app community. If you're already using JavaScript libraries like React, you could probably start doing this. I did have some questions about accessibility with these progressive web apps and browser compatibility. Many only work in newer versions of Chrome, for example. So it's something you could know today. And lastly, GDPR. There was a great talk earlier today going into this in great detail, so I'm going to give you the GDPR for Dummies version. And as you, well, first of all, who has not heard of GDPR? Or maybe all of you already know about it, or feel like there's a lot still you have to learn about it. Good start there. Well, it's now the law across Europe. It sets rules on how companies can use data that is acquired online, and it requires transparency on the data that you are collecting on your website and giving information on how users can opt out of that data collection. Things like your name and address and photos and your IP address and your user accounts. So is this something you should learn if you're in the United States and this is a European law? I think the question is, do you have any site visitors that may be from abroad? Because if you do, this law applies as protection for any citizen of the European Union. So if they're visiting your site and that's where they're from, then the law could apply and you could be in violation of it if you are not compliant. I could see future US policy following something similar, or at the very least large organizations, international businesses that will adopt these standards, and it's something you should learn. I also think just being concerned about people's privacy is just being a good citizen. So as far as what you have to do, at the start, have an easy to understand privacy policy. Easy methods for users to opt out of collecting data. Verify that users have explicitly opted into things like a newsletter. And offer alerts to the presence of cookies on your site. Add terms to web forms and don't save user data if you don't have to. This Drupal module for GDPR isn't going to solve all this, but it can help get you started. So I think it's something you should know now. All right, so key takeaways I want to say is feel good about yourself even if you don't know everything. And I don't have all the buzzwords figured out, but I like to get a sense of where I should focus my attention so that I can keep giving good service to my site visitors and clients without overwhelming my brain with things I don't need to learn right now. So one to grow on. It's okay to not know everything. All right, and I'm already out of time. So that's it. Thank you. Hard to cram all that in 30 minutes. If you guys want to go to the next session, I know we're past time, that's fine. If you want to stick around and ask questions, I'm happy to do that. So, thank you.
Are there stated penalties for non-compliance with GDPR?
Yeah. It's a fairly significant financial penalty. Do you know what it is?
20 million euro and 4% of your worldwide profit.
They have police that come and arrest you?
They have supervisory authorities.
Yeah.
They're going to fly over with your